61. Can we talk? I narrowed my eyes at the boy standing on my doorstep. He was so nervous he was trembling. I wasn't even exaggerating. He looked like he was moments away from being a part of some unholy sacrifice. His hands were shaking like dry leaves in a storm, and his wide eyes kept darting around like he was expecting a landmine to explode beneath him at any second. Unable to resist, I leaned forward and lowered my voice for dramatic effect before shouting, "Boo!" Ah! He flinched so hard he nearly leapt out of his skin. Why would you do that? I burst out laughing. Ah, relax. I was having a boring day. Calming down, I gave him a proper look from head to toe and arched an eyebrow. So, who are you, exactly? The boy blinked at me, looking utterly bewildered. Why, you don't remember me? Should I? I tilted my head. Have we met? We just met. A few hours ago, he spluttered, his voice climbing higher with every word. I'm Ivan. I was with my friends, Victor and Irina. You gave us back the money you, borrowed from us. I frowned, tapping my chin. After a few seconds, I snapped my fingers. Oh, right, you're one of those idiots, one of those Frostborn. Sorry, you guys all have very forgettable faces, you know. He looked genuinely offended at my words. You guys, that's rude. And maybe racist, I snorted. Oh, no. Bye, you guys, I don't mean Northerners. I mean literally everyone besides me. His jaw fell open in utter confusion. I nodded sincerely. Oh, yeah, see, Ivan, he corrected meekly, but I ignored him. I've gotten so used to staring at my own beautiful face every morning in the mirror for hours. Naturally, now no other face in the world even comes close, so nothing sticks in my memory. It's not you, it's me. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, clearly at a loss for words. After a moment, he managed, that has to be the most narcissistic thing I've ever heard. Aside from your speech at the ceremony. I shrugged casually. It's not narcissism if it's true, Nikan. It's Ivan, he muttered, but the correction sounded more defeated this time. Right, that's what I said. I waved him off before heading back inside. The boy followed me behind with the confidence of someone who didn't know what they should do next. Anyway, I guided him back to the living room and gestured for him to sit on the sofa. You're here for something, aren't you? Or did you really just come to bask in my glorious presence? He hesitated, as if debating whether to actually speak or just run out of the room. Meanwhile, I grabbed a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. Eventually, he took a deep breath and straightened his back, well, as much as someone like him could. I came to thank you for earlier. Thank me, I frowned, genuinely surprised. For what? Returning your money? Well, yes. And for, I wanted to ask you something. He smiled the kind of smile you'd expect from someone trying to pat a rabid wolf. If I was to return my share of money back to you, could you do me a favor? You want to pay me for a favor? I mused, pouring some scotch into the glasses, grabbing one for myself and pushing the other toward him. That's new. Most people just beg. Oh, I don't drink. Ivan waved his hands. I blinked a couple of times before taking a slow sip from my glass, watching him squirm under my gaze. This scotch is worth more than what most people earn in a year, you know. A man should always know when to indulge and when to abstain. I shook my head in disappointment. Anyway, go on. What's this favor you're so nervous about? He shifted in his seat like a child preparing for confession before finally blurting out, it's about my friend, Irina. Irina, I drawled, letting her name stretch like I was savoring it. The one with strawberry blonde hair and the most punchable face I've ever seen. Sure, go on. Ivan's face twisted in horror. She doesn't have a punchable face. She does, I said matter-of-factly. But continue, and make it quick. I have somewhere I need to be. Oh, okay. He exhaled sharply, steeling himself. I think I like her. Like her. I tilted my head, faking confusion. And this is a problem because she likes my best friend Victor, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Unrequited love, I said, sipping my drink with mock solemnity. The classic tragedy. So, let me guess. You're here to ask me, Samael Theosbane, for advice on how to win her over. His face flushed even redder, but he nodded. Why yes. You're the most confident person I've ever seen. Most nobles are conceited, but you're just on another level. Even at the ceremony, the speech you gave in front of everyone, I could never say those things to anyone in a million years. Irina said she likes confident guys, so I thought maybe I could come to you. Maybe get some advice, and I leaned forward, a slow grin spreading across my face. And you figured I'd take pity on you because of your tragic romantic plight? His face somehow turned an even deeper shade of crimson. I didn't mean it like that. Oh, I know exactly what you meant, I said, waving him off. And while I'm flattered you think so highly of me, let me make one thing abundantly clear. I leaned back in my chair, letting my smirk fade. I'm not interested. What? He yelped, looking completely crushed. But why not? Because, I said, taking another sip of my scotch, you're boring. And your little love triangle? Even more boring. Irina likes Victor. Victor probably has no idea. And you're the third wheel clinging to the cart like your life depends on it. He opened and closed his mouth a few times, his expression crumbling into a sad, deflated mess. I sighed, resting the glass against my lips. Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. Well, maybe a little, but your problem is entirely your own. And honestly, what chance do you stand against Victor? If I remember correctly, he's taller, stronger, and considerably less shaky than you. I gestured toward the door. You can see yourself out. I have better things to do than playing Cupid in your teenage drama. For a moment, I thought he might actually cry. His shoulders slumped, his face reddened. His steps were heavy as he got up and turned to leave, probably heading straight for some empty park bench to have a heartfelt sob session. But just as he moved, something caught my eye. Something shiny glistening in the room's dull light. It was a badge pinned to his uniform. My eyes squinted as I leaned forward. Wait a second, he froze mid-step. What? That badge, I said, my tone shifting from disinterest to intrigue. You're in the Alchemy Society. He blinked, glancing down as if he'd only just remembered it was there. Why yeah, why? A devious smile crept back onto my face. Oh, this was too perfect. I had been considering hiring a novice alchemist to assist me with some of my plans. And now, as if fate itself had intervened, one had walked right through my door. The heavens must be favoring me today. Oh, no reason, I said casually, though my smirk betrayed the storm brewing in my mind. Except that changes everything. His eyes widened. It does. Of course, I exclaimed, setting my glass down with an air of sudden enthusiasm. I could never turn away a future scholar of such noble pursuits, especially one with access to certain resources. Our resources. I nodded, my expression as innocent as a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, let's talk about your little crush, Igor. I think I might just have the perfect plan. Ivan, he tried to correct me yet again, his voice defeated, but then he froze mid-sentence upon realizing what I had just said. Wait, you do? So, why you are willing to help me? Of course, I said, pointing toward the chair, and he sat back down like an eager puppy. But before I help you with your love life, you'll need to do 3 favors for me. 3? He asked, incredulous. Well, unless you think you can win over a girl so far out of your league without any help, feel free to reject my offer. I shrugged nonchalantly. He didn't hesitate for even a second. Whatever, I'll do whatever you say. I couldn't help but marvel at how quickly he surrendered. Love really does make people desperate, doesn't it? Honestly, I couldn't comprehend the concept of falling in love. Caring for anyone other than me. It was a funny thought. Good, I like your enthusiasm. I clapped my hands together. First, let's start with something simple. I need rumors spreading about me. Rumors. Ivan frowned, confused. Yeah, I explained. It won't be hard. I've already laid some groundwork. For instance, your friends will definitely be talking shit about me in noble circles behind my back. Oh, so you want me to counter those rumors with good ones about you? Ivan asked, trying to make sense of it. No, I corrected, shaking my head. I want the negative rumors to keep coming. Both the commoners and the nobles. I want everyone to focus on me, and only me. Ivan scratched his neck, looking uneasy. Oh okay, I know this task might be a little tricky for you since you're, I gave him a hard look, an introvert. So, I need you to go find a guy named Vince Cleverly in our batch. Ask him to do this job, but don't mention my name. Just tell him to give you his bank account number and promise him 1,000 credits for every rumor he spreads. Vince Cleverly, isn't he one of our batch's top-ranking cadets? He is. How do you know he'll do what you ask? I nearly laughed out loud. In the game, Vince Cleverly was a fan-favorite side character. He was a shrewd man who knew more legal loopholes than some of the major lawyers. He loved chaos and would do almost anything for the right price. Because of that, he was neither a hero nor a villain, everyone hated him equally. He was the kind of guy who always knew someone for any job you could possibly imagine. Believe me, he'll do it. All he cares about is money, I said with a smirk. Next up, I need you to create a big vial of fake blood for me. Fake blood, Ivan stammered, looking thoroughly taken aback. Yeah, originally, I thought about just making someone bleed and collecting their blood, but then I decided fake blood would be better. Be better for what? What are you planning to do? His voice wavered as though he wasn't ready to hear my answer. I couldn't resist messing with him a bit. Glaring at him as seriously as I could, I intoned in a deep voice, "Don't ask me about my business, Vivan. Don't ever ask me about my business." This time, the poor boy didn't even bother correcting his name. His face went pale, and I was genuinely worried he might keel over from sheer terror. I burst out laughing. "I'm kidding. Relax. But seriously, don't ask. Anyway, for my last favor, I need you to keep an eye on a girl named Juliana. She's my shadow. You must have seen her. White hair, blue eyes, infuriatingly good looking. She's in the Alchemy Society too. Yes, I think I know her." Ivan hesitated, scratching his head. "You want me to spy on her?" "No, not spy," I clarified. "Just take an interest. Let me know when she's in the lab, when she leaves, and who she talks to. Don't make it obvious. You're not a spy, you're an observant admirer." "Got it." That seemed to calm him down. "All right, I can do that." Standing up, I placed a hand on his shoulder and gave him a reassuring smile. "Good. Do these 3 things for me, and I promise I'll help you win over your little crush. I always pay my debts." The look of pure joy that spread across his face was almost enough to make me feel bad. "Almost. Now, if you don't mind, I have some business to attend to," I said, guiding him toward the door. Just as he stepped out, a thought struck me, and I called after him, "By the way, what's your origin card?" "Oh," he perked up, looking oddly proud. "I can hold my breath underwater for 7 minutes." I blinked, staring at him. Surely, he wasn't serious. That's your superpower, holding your breath for a long time underwater." "That's right." He nodded firmly, his chest puffed out with pride. I struggled to find words. "And Victor's ability, what's his innate power?" "Oh, he can shoot lasers from his eyes." "Wow, if I were Irina, I'd also pick the guy who could shoot freaking lasers from his eyes over a fucking human fish." This was going to be an uphill battle. 62. There were many significant side characters in the game Spirit Realm Chronicles. However, the story mainly revolved around the members of Squad 9, the primary heroes. The members of Squad 9 were Lily Elderwing, Michael Godswill, Alexia Zinxex, Kong Tae Jin, and Ray Warner. Initially, their relationship, much like the start of the story, was slow. But over the course of the game, they grew closer and became one big dysfunctional family. As the game progressed, more members joined their found family, including characters like Vince Cleverly and Juliana Blade. However, the original crew remained the Squad 9 members. The underlying reason for their close bond was a major event in the story, the massacre during the class excursion. By the conclusion of that arc, the Squad 9 members found themselves stranded in a very dangerous region of the Spirit Realm, alongside a few minor characters who were all killed off for character development and to show the high stakes of their situation. Anyway, that event was still far in the future. In fact, I doubted it would ever take place since it occurred because Samael came into contact with the summoning card of Asmodeus. But Samael in this reality, who was me, was not foolish. I had clearly avoided that scenario. So, my current goal was to prevent the original Squad 9 from forming at all, as I wanted to be a part of it. However, I was facing a dilemma. I needed to decide who I was going to replace. For example, I couldn't take Michael's place in Squad 9 for 2 reasons. First, he was a crucial factor in his team's success in the test that granted them their team-building mission assignment, which was the whole reason I wanted to join his squad. Second, he would never agree to any of my shady requests. The same applied to Lily. Aside from the fact that she and I weren't on talking terms, she would never simply give up her position in the squad without a good reason. Then there was Alexia. I could approach her and try to strike another deal, but honestly, she scared me a bit. And besides, negotiating with her wouldn't be easy. As for Kong Tae Jin, he was Alexia's shadow, so he would likely refuse to switch squads with me as well. That left just one person, Ray Warner. And truthfully speaking, I believed I had a better chance of convincing him than I did with Alexia. Why? Because at this point in the story Ray didn't care about anything. I wasn't joking. In the game, or in any media I had ever consumed, Ray Warner was the most laid-back character I had ever seen. He only wanted to flirt with beautiful girls, drink fine alcohol, work out, and flirt with beautiful girls again. He was the type of guy who loved to party and had an unbothered outlook on life. That personality of his would make my task easier. Now all I had to do was find him. Since Ray was one of the top-ranking cadets, in fact, he was second in the top 10, just below me, he had access to some of the Academy's VIP facilities. One of these was access to the main training gym, which was reserved for only the top cadets from each batch. I had no idea if Ray would even be there, but my best chance of finding him was in that gym. So, I went there anyway. The Academy's main gym looked exactly as you would expect from a top-tier training center for the awakened. The building was massive from the outside, almost towering, and when I entered, I was even more impressed. The interior was spacious, filled with cutting-edge magic and technology. Gleaming, top-of-the-line equipment lined the expansive floor, ranging from state-of-the-art treadmills and weight machines to enchanted dummies designed to simulate live combatants. A floating holographic scoreboard hovered near the ceiling, displaying real-time statistics of those currently training. Even the floor was made of an adaptive material, adjusting its firmness and temperature to suit different activities. Meanwhile, the walls were constructed from supersteel, designed to withstand heavy abuse. Damn, I muttered under my breath. But despite its grandeur, the gym wasn't overly crowded. In fact, it wasn't crowded at all. Being exclusive to only a handful of cadets, it was even quieter with the start of the first semester. Most of the first years had no energy left after our first academic day to even think about working out. That didn't mean it was completely empty, though. I could spot a few faces from my batch, along with some upperclassmen. And then, there he was. A young man with wavy, light brown hair and eyes that seemed to glow softly. His features were almost too perfect to be real. His face could easily belong to an angel, with flawless pale skin smoother than most maidens and a height that towered over average boys. He was the kind of person who made everyone nearby wonder how they could possibly look so plain in comparison. At the moment, he was laughing in that effortless, charming way of his, talking to a second-year girl, clearly the center of her attention. Yeah, that was definitely him. But now didn't look like a good time to pull him aside to talk. So, I figured I'd give Ray some time to finish up his flirt session, as interrupting him would only make things awkward. So, instead, I headed to an empty corner of the gym and started stretching. Not because I particularly wanted to work out, but because standing around doing nothing would make me look like a complete fool. I noticed that all the equipment near me were enchanted artifacts, faintly humming with energy. I glanced at the weight rack, immediately dismissing it, too much effort. The treadmills, absolutely not. Running was for people who enjoyed torture. Finally, my eyes settled on a nearby punching dummy. Perfect. It had been a while since I last practiced my martial arts anyway. Deciding on it, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a few small, shimmering cyan crystals. They were essence stones, one of the most valuable materials mined from the spirit realm. And why were they so valuable? Because these crystals had a unique property: they could absorb and store essence from the atmosphere over a long period of time. When broken, the stored essence could then be absorbed by an awakened, strengthening their soul. This fact made these stones far more precious than diamonds ever were back in the old world. But there was a catch. For low-ranked awakened like me, those who couldn't sense essence yet, most of the energy inside the stone was wasted upon breaking. Since we couldn't sense essence, we couldn't actively absorb it. As a result, a significant portion of it simply dissipated back into the atmosphere. This was why the rich awakened couldn't simply climb their way to higher ranks by hoarding these stones. It was also why essence stones were considered too valuable to be given to low rankers. Yet here I was, holding them. The Academy had a long-standing tradition of rewarding essence stones to the top 10 cadets of every batch at the start of the semester. It was a symbol of excellence. A mark of prestige. In fact, these particular stones had been handed to me directly by the Grand Master during the opening ceremony. Of course, these ones weren't very pure. But they were still better than nothing. I crushed the 4 stones in my hand one after another, watching them disintegrate into dust before my eyes. At the same time, I felt a surge of energy flooding my body. It was like adrenaline rushing through my veins, sparking a sudden burst of strength. This was just the short-term aftereffect of absorbing a lot of essence at once. Nodding to myself, I turned my gaze toward the combat dummy. As I approached it, the dummy sprang to life, adopting a defensive stance. "Let's see what you've got, you glorified scarecrow," I muttered, more to myself than to the inanimate target. 30 minutes later, I was bent over, hands on my knees, gasping for air like I was drowning. My muscles screamed in pain, my heart pounded wildly, and my limbs throbbed relentlessly. The combat dummy stood tall over me, and even though it had no face, I could almost swear it was smirking proudly. This was yet another side effect of absorbing too much essence at once. Once the initial rush of strength wore off, I was left completely drained. Fortunately, by that time, Ray had finally finished his conversation. The second-year girl he'd been flirting with walked away, flustered and blushing. Finally, I could talk to him now. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself, then moved to deliver a sudden spinning heel kick to the dummy's chest, sending it staggering back. "Ha!" This time I smirked at it and walked away. "Ray Warner," I called, stopping a few paces from him. "Got a minute?" He turned and raised an eyebrow. A grin spread across his face when he recognized me. "Lord Samael," he greeted. "Should I be honored that you know my name, or should I be worried?" "Honored," I said flatly. "Even more honored because I have an offer for you." His grin widened. "Yeah, no, I'm worried, but go ahead, I'm listening. Though, try to make it quick. You saw that girl I was talking to, right? I've gotta meet her later. Wasn't she cute, by the way? Wow, this guy was a bundle of energy. Quote. Yeah, actually, she was," I agreed, despite myself. "Now listen up. The academy will divide the first years into squads of 5 tomorrow. I want you to switch squads with me." Ray frowned, caught off guard for a moment. He clearly hadn't expected to hear that when I said I had a deal for him. Why?" he asked. "Personal reasons," I answered curtly. "And why would I listen to you?" His eyes narrowed. "I'm not forcing you," I laughed. "It's your choice. But here's the deal, my squad will have Princess Alice." Ray froze, and I could see the effect it had on him. Throughout the first few arcs, Ray had a thing for Princess Alice. It wasn't exactly a crush, more like him wanting to score a real princess. Unfortunately for him, Alice was one of the few sensible girls who wasn't affected by his boundless charm. Their interactions in the game had always been awkward. "You're not lying?" he asked, his voice low and full of doubt. "How do you even know she'll be in your squad?" That was a genuine reaction. After all, the task of assigning teams was random. No one was supposed to know who their squad mates would be. "I just know," I assured him vaguely. "But if you don't believe me, for which I won't blame you, I can also throw you a bottle of Glenharden 25-year-old Scotch." Ray's eyes widened at the mention of that. Glenharden was a prestigious brand of whiskey, and one of their 25-year-old bottles would be considered a priced luxury. I knew it was something even Ray would never pass up. And just like I expected, he stood up, offering me the brightest smile I had ever seen, and extended a hand for me to shake. Deal. And that completed all my preparations. 63. What? No, this is wrong. There must be some sort of mistake. I'm telling you, there isn't. And I'm telling you, there is. Here, you can see it in the records. His name is in your squad. If you have a problem with it, discuss it among yourselves. But. Right now, we were standing on the edge of one of the orbiting islands. Almost the entire island was covered by a huge dome-shaped structure with no entrances or exits. Inside that dome, spirit beasts were crawling everywhere. It could even be said that this island served as a prison for those twisted abominations. Today was our second academic day, and this was the last class before lunch, Spirit Realm Simulation. The objective of this class was to prepare the cadets for the threats of the spirit realm, which they would inevitably face one day, be it the monsters, the environment, or, most importantly, their fellow hunters. Almost all the first-year cadets were present here, around several hundred of them. As usual, large social circles were formed around popular figures such as Princess Alice Vick Draken, my sister Talia, several other notable young nobles, and some top-ranking cadets. And once again, I found myself surrounded by no one. Well, except for my loyal and caring shadow, of course. All first years were divided into squads of 5. Everyone was notified about their team members and squad number by an email from the academy last night. It was possible to change one's squad by submitting an application. The time limit for that was before this class, which started about 10 minutes ago. However, since not many people had any issues with their assigned squads, very few bothered going through the hassle of submitting a change application. Besides, just because changing one's squad was possible did not mean it was easy. After all, someone out there should be willing to trade places with you. Maybe that was why two of my teammates looked so baffled to see me. Clearly, they hadn't expected me to be in squad. One of them, in particular, wasn't very happy about it. That was Michael, of course. He was arguing with a tall, beautiful woman who seemed to be in her early 30s. Her long hair was as black as the sky on a moonless night, and her eyes were a light shade of gray. Her face was soft, but not without a certain sharpness, a striking blend of beauty and authority. A loose black robe was draped around her figure, fluttering gently in the wind. It looked almost like a mantle made of shadows. There were dark baggy circles under her eyes that made it painfully clear she hadn't slept properly in days, maybe even weeks, giving her a gloomy appearance. And then she was also wearing a pointy black hat. Combined with everything else, it made her look exactly like one of those evil witches from old fantasy stories. It did not help that the world around her seemed to turn darker, the shadows growing deeper and the light converging around her, as if giving her a natural spotlight. That was Celine Valkrin, one of the strongest hunters of the current generation. She was our survival instructor. In terms of power, Celine was said to be on par with my father, the Golden Duke. Unfortunately, she wasn't as well known among the general public as him. She had little interest in fame and rarely bothered with public appearances. And even on the rare occasions she attended press conferences, she always made a point of staying in the background. But that didn't mean she wasn't known at all. On the contrary, nearly everyone had heard about her, most had just not ever seen her. That was why almost all the cadets here were frozen in her presence, utterly captivated, not just by her dark beauty, but also because it was their first time seeing her in the flesh. But Michael was among the few who couldn't have cared less. He waved his communicator device in front of her face, showing her the email he received from the academy, and spoke to her as if he was addressing a customer service person who had just denied him a refund. "Look here," he said, jabbing the screen like it owed him money. "This clearly says the fifth member of our squad was supposed to be a guy named Ray Warner. So tell me," he gestured vaguely toward me, as if I was some kind of a defective product, and resumed. "Exactly how did he get into our squad and why weren't we notified about it?" Celine sighed like someone trying to teach their grandma how to use a new phone. She adjusted the brim of her witchy hat, and her gray eyes glistened like steel under the shadow as she glanced at Michael's communicator device. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if she was fighting the urge to snatch it from his hands and toss it off the floating island. "Mr. Godswill," she began, her tone smooth and monotonous. "Let me clarify something for you. I am your survival instructor, not an academy secretary, not your mother, and certainly not a wizard capable of rewriting academy emails." Michael opened his mouth, but Celine raised a finger, silencing him faster than a toddler caught stealing cookies. "And before you ask, yes, I do know how inconvenient this is for you. Truly, my heart breaks." She placed a hand on her chest for dramatic effect, though her expression suggested her heart was not just unbroken, but positively thriving on his discomfort. "But as I said, the records are final. If you have an issue, take it up with the administration." Michael sputtered, holding his communicator like it was some sacred text. "But this is from the administration." "Look," Celine interrupted sharply. "The only explanation is that Mr. Warner submitted a change application at the very last moment. The academy didn't have time to send you a notifying email after processing his transfer to another squad." A faint ripple of snickers spread among the gathered cadets, but Michael ignored them and jabbed a thumb in my direction. "And what about him?" he asked accusingly. "What's he doing here?" Celine turned to me, her eyes narrowing for a moment before returning to Michael. "Filling up Mr. Warner's position." "But why him?" Michael cried out. "Was there no one else? No one else in the whole batch who could have been the replacement?" "Perhaps Mr. Theosbane and Mr. Warner submitted their applications together." Celine shrugged, unbothered. Michael looked like he might cry from sheer exasperation. He shook his head and wailed, "I want to change squads." "Not possible anymore," Celine shot back curtly. "This whole situation stinks. It stinks," Michael shouted, as if he'd finally lost his mind to paranoia. He pointed at me again. I know in my heart that this guy set the whole thing up. Well, he wasn't wrong. I knew if Michael found out I was going to be on his team, he'd try to switch squads. So, I asked Ray to submit his change application at the very last minute, and I did the same. As a result, the academy processed our transfers but didn't have enough time to notify our new squad members. I don't care, Celine replied flatly. Michael's shoulders slumped, his last reserves of defiance crumbling. He muttered something that sounded suspiciously like "this is so stupid," but this time it was Celine who didn't care. Instead, she turned to the gathered first years and started speaking loudly for all of us to hear. Now, if we're done wasting time, let me remind everyone why you're here. Inside this dome are spirit beasts, ranging from mildly annoying to violently homicidal. The environment inside is also artificially designed to recreate a relatively safe region of the spirit realm. It's not the real deal, so it won't be deadly. And don't worry, the spirit beasts are weakened. Most of them are only infant or minor grade spirits. She let those words settle in, pausing just long enough to let us feel the significance before continuing smoothly. I'm going to send you in there. This is a test to determine where you stand. You won't be graded based on your performance, so no need to feel pressured. However, the team that performs exceptionally well will be rewarded with their first mission from the academy. So do try your best. A collective sound of gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Missions were always a big deal for hunters in training. Naturally, everyone wanted to be sent on one by the academy. The air seemed to thrum with the buzz of excitement, each cadet trying to mask their nervousness with bravado. Celine smiled faintly upon seeing their enthusiasm, the slight curve of her lips barely perceptible, before nodding. Now, how do you win this test? Be the first team to slay 7 spirit beasts and reach the center of the dome. There, in a cave, you'll find an essence stone. You'll need to crush it. Achieve all this in under 40 minutes. Simple, right? Of course, it was simple. But we all knew it was far from easy. Celine snapped her fingers, and almost instantly, the very fabric of space in front of us began to tear open, the rift widening as if reality itself were being peeled apart. A deep, almost suffocating darkness poured out, and the edges of the portal shimmered with a faint violet glow, flickering like the afterglow of a dying star. Around the portal, fractured fragments of space hung suspended like shards of broken glass that had yet to fall. As I said, this isn't the real deal. This portal is artificially created to give you an experience as close to the real thing as possible. Each time a team enters, the gateway on the other side will change location, so every team will be dropped off in different areas of the dome. You have 10 minutes. Strategize, and then step forward with your squads when you're ready to dive in. Good luck, class. 64. After Michael wasted some time by arguing with our survival instructor about one of his teammates, which happened to be me, we were finally given 10 minutes to regroup with our squad members and strategize. Right now, Michael and Lily were standing in front of me. Juliana had left my side to join her own squad. Our other 2 teammates, Alexia and Kong, were still nowhere to be seen. So the tension around our little group was palpable. Michael looked like he was barely restraining himself from blowing up again. Lily, on the other hand, seemed like she wanted to say something but didn't know what. As for me, I couldn't be bothered. I was casually inspecting my nails while ignoring those 2. Luckily, before the anxious silence between the 3 of us could get any more awkward, Alexia finally arrived. The blind girl moved through the crowd while holding onto the sleeve of her shadow, a tall, tan-skinned, white-haired boy with cerulean eyes and an almost feral appeal to his sharp face. That boy was Kong Tae Jin. He was one of the supporting male leads, alongside Ray Warner. In the original story, Ray was supposed to meet the main cast today, but since I had taken his place, that wasn't going to happen. I was fully aware that altering the story this early would create unpredictable consequences down the line, but honestly, I couldn't bring myself to care. The Academy had promised a reward, a mission granted to the best performing squad during this test. And I needed to secure that mission. Once it was over, I figured I'd return Ray his spot on this team by swapping squads with him again. I wouldn't do that because I was afraid of changing the story, but because the thought of spending another moment in the same team as Michael was simply insufferable. Alexia stopped a few steps away from us and let go of Kang's sleeve. He leaned in to whisper something in her ear, likely describing how we looked. She nodded, turning her attention toward us with an amused expression. So, she began, spreading her arms theatrically. Why is everyone in such a sour mood? Rejoice, you're all graced by my fabulous presence. You're late, Michael snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through stone. Alexia tilted her head, a bemused smile on her doll-like face. Late? Oh, no, Michael. I arrived when I intended to. The issue here is that you were early. Michael gritted his teeth, looking like he was battling the urge to facepalm. Alexia rolled her eyes and pointed vaguely around to the gathered first years. Fine, I'm sorry, I guess. Crowds are annoying for me. Everyone's aura blends together, it's like trying to walk through a maze of fog. Kong crossed his arms and stepped forward, his voice carrying a dry edge. Besides, it didn't seem like you were discussing anything important, or even talking at all. I let out a quiet sigh. It was a barely audible sound. But Alexia's head snapped toward me instantly. That was when I noticed a card floating around her waist. It was the same sensory enhancement card that I'd given her. Well, if it isn't Lord Samael, Alexia teased, a mischievous grin lighting up her face. What brings you here? Before I could answer, Michael cut in. He did something and got into our squad. Whoa, what's with the accusatory tone? I shot back, feigning offense. And what exactly do you think I did? I just wanted to change my squad, so I put in an application and ended up in yours. It was pure coincidence. Michael narrowed his eyes. It was a coincidence, was it? Sure, and I'm the king of the world. Congratulations on your coronation, your majesty, I said with an exaggerated bow. May your reign be long and uneventful. Michael glared at me like I had stolen both his kidneys. Do you ever take anything seriously? Yes, I replied sincerely. I'm serious about a lot of things. Like my personal comfort, for example. Which, right now, is in grave danger thanks to your annoying voice. Michael's face turned red, and I swear his head was about to explode. But fortunately before that, Lily stepped in and placed a hand on his shoulder. Okay, let's all calm down, she said, her voice as sweet as ever. We need to focus on strategizing if we want to win. First, we should assign a squad leader. She hesitated for a moment before shifting toward me. Samael, since you're the ace, do you want the position? But instead of answering her, I started inspecting my nails, blatantly ignoring her question. A whole minute passed in complete silence as Lily stood there, visibly waiting for my response. Honestly, I didn't know what was wrong with me. Why was I ignoring the female lead? Maybe I wasn't as at ease with her presence as I'd convinced myself. Perhaps some stubborn part of me still hadn't forgiven her, no matter how much I pretended I didn't care. Alexia's grin widened as she watched the interaction unfold. Ooh, I smell a drama brewing. No, there will be no drama. Michael barked, his voice cracking with frustration. And for the record, why would he get to be leader just because he's the ace? He wouldn't even be the ace if it wasn't for his shadow helping him. I scowled at the accusation. Excuse me, I won that title fair and square. Michael jabbed a finger at me. Fair and square, you didn't even win by your own strength. Huh, I couldn't believe how hypocritical this guy was. He had help from a literal ancient demon created by the false god, one of the most powerful creatures in existence. He was the protagonist, the only one capable of killing the Spirit King and saving the heavens. The entire world practically revolved around him. He was blessed by destiny. And he was accusing me of cheating. His entire existence was the biggest cheat of them all. A vein throbbed on my forehead as I barked back, I just used every resource available to me. And for your information, the ace isn't about being the strongest cadet in a batch, it's about being the best. And guess what? I bested you. I bested all of you. Michael turned to Lily, throwing his hands in the air dramatically. Do you know how to perform CPR, Lily? Because this guy is coping so much he's practically drowning in it. Then he swiveled back to me. I'm unarguably the strongest here, so I'm the only one fit to be squad leader. Lily looked like she was ready to sink into the earth and disappear forever, but before she could utter a word, Alexia chimed in. I wasn't planning on joining the drama, but you're both wrong, she said, her voice full of amused confidence. Obviously, I should be the squad leader. After all, I went toe-to-toe with both of you, teaming up against me, I might add. Michael scoffed as he shot her a glare. You just caught me off guard. If we fight again, I'll take you down, easily, I might add. Alexia's smirk widened. Sure you would, your majesty. We didn't team up, I sneered. You were the one who was attacking both of us together. Nah, Alexia shook her head. You guys were totally working together. Michael laughed at the ridiculousness of it all. He then faced Alexia. I would never work with this guy. And just to be clear, I would have won if it wasn't for you paralyzing my arm. And just like that, we kept on bickering. In the end, before the three of us could settle on who was more fit to lead our squad, even though it was clearly me, our 10 minutes ran out. Needless to say, we didn't come up with any strategies either, since we spent most of the time arguing. But honestly, we didn't really need any strategies. As much as I disliked those two, having Alexia and Michael on the same team was almost a bit too much for everyone else. And that was the whole point. The academy had set these teams, and they sure as hell weren't trying to make them balanced. In fact, the goal was to make the squads as unbalanced as possible, so they could create as many strongest teams as possible. After all, real-world hunter squads were formed the same way, with the strongest awakened joining forces and working together. Was it unfair to the rest of the first years, especially during tests like these? Of course it was. But, then again, real life wasn't exactly fair either. Celine Valkyrin soon appeared in front of us once again and began calling out the squad numbers. Squad 1, approach the portal. A group of 5 cadets stepped forward hesitantly as they moved toward the portal. One by one, they disappeared into its oppressive darkness. Squad 2, next. Once again, 5 cadets made their way to the portal and vanished inside it. Celine kept on calling out squads until it was finally our turn. Squad 10. Before she could even finish speaking, I had already begun to run. Whoever goes through first becomes the squad leader. I yelled over my shoulder and jumped into the portal. 65. The sensation of stepping through the portal wasn't pleasant at all. It felt like plunging into a frozen lake, the cold biting at my skin as an overwhelming pressure squeezed my chest. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. I stumbled out the other side, landing on uneven ground. Around me was a dense forest. Only the trees weren't green and brown, they were black as night and the leaves were crimson like fresh blood. Except for the red of those leaves, the whole world around me was monochromatic. The sky was gray and the sun was black. Oh, I never noticed this detail in the game. Anyway, everything around me was in the shade of black and white. It didn't help that I was wearing the standard Academy-issued tactical uniform, black trousers and a sleeveless white vest under a dark combat jacket. So even I looked black and white. The air was dry, making my skin feel itchy, and I could hear loud growling and screeching noises in the distance. I turned just in time to see Michael burst through the portal. His face was contorted by a look that was somewhere between anger and disbelief. You absolute. Careful, I interrupted, holding up a finger. You don't want to say something you'll regret in front of your squad leader. Michael glared at me, his jaw tightening as if he was physically restraining himself from punching me. Lily came through next, her arrival far more graceful than Michael's. She glanced around at the forest before her gaze landed on me. That was dangerous, she said simply. You should never go head first into a portal since you never know what's waiting for you on the other side. Without bothering to give her a reply, I looked away, assessing our surrounding area. Alexia and Kong emerged through the portal soon, the tear in the fabric of space vanishing behind them immediately. The blind girl's smirk was firmly in place as she dusted off her vest. She flipped back her ginger hair and gave us all a quick glance. It was then I noticed she already brought out her origin card. There's always so much sexual tension when you three are alone, isn't there? She laughed. I rolled my eyes. There's this thing called thinking before opening your mouth. Try doing it sometimes, Lady Alexia. I tried, she raised her hand and gave me a casual shrug. But it takes away my humor. I wanted to say her humor was like her vision, non-existent, but that would have been taking it too far. So I swallowed my reply and decided to be the bigger man. What? Alexia's smirk widened. Got nothing to say, Lord Samael. Did I overestimate your wits? Your humor is like your vision. Non-existent, I shouted. Whoa, whoa, too far, man, too far. Alexia threw her hands up, but had to immediately grab her shadow, who seemed like he was ready to bite my head off. What did you say, you punk? He growled like an angry dog. That was low, Michael clicked his tongue. Even for you. Meanwhile, Lily just shook her head. Okay, my bad. I'm sorry, I sighed. Now, listen up, here's the plan. Alexia, Michael, and I will slay 7 spirit beasts. Meanwhile, the other 2 remaining members of our team will head to the center of the dome and get the Essence Stone. You're suggesting we split up? Lily quipped, but like usual, I ignored her. That's a terrible plan, Michael commented, and I was happy to reply to him. You think that because you're dumb, I scoffed. Alexia, you and I could easily slay 7 spirit beasts. The other teams can't afford to split up because they don't have the kind of manpower that we do with the three of us here. Then I pointed at Lily and Kong. While we fight and finish the first objective, these two can head to the center of the dome and get the Essence Stone, and finish the second objective. We'll win this thing in no time. It is too dangerous for these two to go deeper into the forest alone, Alexia frowned. It isn't, I shook my head. She can see a few seconds into the future and he has very sharp senses. An oracle and a scout, there is no better combo for avoiding trouble. That seemed to make Alexia give some thought to my plan. But before she could speak again, Kang's face twisted into a scowl. Wait, how do you know about my innate power? He asked, weirdly suspicious. Right, no one here met him before, so no one was supposed to know about his origin card. It granted him the power to turn parts of his body into that of a wolf. Partial wolf transformation, that was his power. I rolled my shoulders as nonchalantly as possible. Do you really think I won't do some research on my teammates? Kong looked like he was about to say something, but before he could, Michael slowly turned his head toward me. Aha, he exclaimed. You said you ended up in this squad as a coincidence before this class. When did you have the time to do background checks on teammates you didn't even know you'd have? Wow, did this guy have to be so perceptive? Shaking my head, I tried changing the topic. We are getting derailed from my genius plan here. Let's win this test first and think about all the useless conspiracies later. I knew it. Michael practically jumped in his spot. You did do something to end up in our squad. You know what, we can't trust you since you lied to our faces. To our faces. By our unanimous vote, you're not our squad leader anymore. What unanimous vote? I wailed. I didn't get to vote, Alexia blinked confusedly. But this time, it was Michael who completely ignored me and turned to Lily. Lily, activate your origin card and be our support, he then turned to Kong. You'll be our scout. We'll move as one unit and leave no man behind. He glared at me. Not even you. But I'll talk to you later. This is a stupid idea, I snarled. By splitting our forces, we'll complete this test faster, Anna. My words cut off mid-sentence as someone yanked me from behind. Lily had grabbed the collar of my jacket and hauled me back, nearly causing me to lose my footing. In the same motion, she raised her leg up and slammed her foot into Michael's chest with as much force as she could muster, sending him staggering back. The momentum shoved us both in opposite directions, while Lily herself fell to the ground upon losing her balance. And thank heavens she did. That because in the very next second, something sliced through the air where I'd just been standing, moving in a blur too fast for our eyes to track. Something similar zipped past Michael's shoulder in the blink of an eye. It all happened in a heartbeat, so fast that Alexia reacted just a second too late, shouting, "Watch out." I snapped my head in the direction where those things had gone and instantly spotted two bat-like creatures. They had leathery black skin, identical in color and texture to the trees they had been hanging from, and their crimson eyes matched the eerie red leaves of this forest. Their appearance helped them camouflage against this haunting surroundings, making them almost invisible. You couldn't possibly spot these creatures unless you were actively looking for them. The only giveaway about them was the razor-sharp edges of their wings which glinted like polished blades under the ominous black sun here. Goodness, if one of those things had struck me, it would have gutted me like a butcher carving up a pig. I immediately recognized them. Bladewraiths, aptly named for their razor-edge wings and ghostly speed. I wasn't exaggerating. These creatures were infamous for their ability to streak through the air at blistering speeds, reaching up to 400 km per hour in short bursts. Judging by the size of these two, they were infant-grade spirit beasts, the lowest tier of their kind, and also the slowest. Their speed wouldn't exceed 200 km per hour. But that was still way too fast. They'd reach us before we could even activate our cards, since summoning a card takes a few seconds. Fortunately, I reacted the moment Lily pulled me back and began casting my cards. A heartbeat later, one of the Bladewraiths let out a piercing shriek and launched itself forward in a blur, targeting Lily, who was still scrambling to her feet. Michael moved without hesitation, stepping in to intercept it. But before he could reach her, the second Bladewraith lunged at him, equally as fast and deadly as the first one. The protagonist clicked his tongue and raised his sword, which had appeared in his hand only God knew when. Michael didn't try to match the creature's speed. He simply let it come to him. As it closed in, he angled his sword carefully. The Bladewraith was too fast to stop. It ended up skewering itself on his blade. Ironically, the speed that should have helped it kill its prey became the reason for its own demise. But the ordeal wasn't over. The first Bladewraith was still closing in on Lily, and Michael didn't have the time, or the positioning, to handle it. Not that he needed to. That one was mine. My Steelhide card manifested over my shoulder, hardening my skin in an instant. At the same time, I swung my leg forward, stepping between Lily and the incoming Bladewraith. The creature's razor wings connected with my shin but failed to cut through. My hardened skin did not break, but it still stung like hell. I winced in pain as the momentum of my kick sent the Bladewraith hurtling backward until it slammed into a nearby tree with a sickening crunch. Before it could recover or use its speed again, my Flame Lash card materialized next, and a whip of blazing fire coiled in my hand. I snapped the fiery whip forward, obliterating not just the Bladewraith but the tree behind it as well, reducing both to a shower of flaming splinters that scattered across the small clearing. For a moment, everything was still. Then I exhaled, glancing down at Lily. "You good?" She could only give a half nod before Michael helped her to her feet. "The sounds of us talking must have drawn those two here," Alexia said, her voice carrying a gravity I wasn't used to hearing from her. "We should start moving," Kong added, his canines looking sharper than usual. "Infant beasts often move in packs." "Yes," Alexia agreed, her eyes narrowing. "I can sense more beasts like those two approaching, though I'm not certain how many." Michael nodded firmly. "Yeah, let's get moving." He yanked the dead Bladewraith off his sword, then slashed it through the air, pausing mid-swing and letting the dark blood on it splatter to the ground. Lily glanced down at my leg. My trousers were torn, showing a bruised shin. "Can you walk?" she asked, her tone soft. Instead of answering her, I simply walked past. I was limping slightly, but I could still run if I wanted to. So, without another word, we decided to start moving. 66. The air was extremely dry here. So much so that it burned in our throats and chests every time we inhaled. It felt like breathing in sandpaper, scratching at our lungs. This made running or doing any heavy exercise in these harsh surroundings even more difficult. We couldn't perform anywhere near our optimum physical condition. My squad suspected the cause of this was these black trees with crimson leaves all around us. And they were right. These trees were not ordinary. It wasn't just the dryness, they seemed to be releasing something subtle yet oppressive into the atmosphere. A toxin. Yes, the dry air was filled with toxins, carrying a faint metallic tang like that of rusted blood. In the game, this toxin was discovered to be a substance called ethylorine. Ethylorine was a naturally occurring alchemical compound that was produced by various plants in the spirit realm. Normally, it wasn't dangerous to humans in light doses. In fact, under typical conditions, it could even induce a euphoric sensation when inhaled, similar to opium. However, this forest was saturated with ethylorine to an unusually high degree. These black trees were producing too much of it. In these concentrations, the overabundance of ethylorine created a toxic and arid environment. It inflamed our respiratory systems and made it almost impossible for us to function at our full capacity. Combined with the heat from the black sun above, it stripped the air of humidity, leaving it bone dry and harsh to breathe. Our endurance was naturally high since we were all awakened. Any normal human would have fainted by now. After all, this forest wasn't made to support life, it was designed to extinguish it. And the deeper we ventured into the forest, the harsher the conditions became. All of us struggled to maintain our pace. Especially me, since I had injured my leg while fighting that Bladewraith and it still throbbed with pain. But guess which one of us wasn't affected by these conditions at all? Michael. Of course, it was Michael. Since he could circulate spirit essence through his body, not only was his endurance unimaginably superior to ours, but Zaldrith had also taught him a technique to resist any kind of poison or toxin. In simple terms, he could use the essence circulation to isolate harmful substances within his body, at least to some extent. He hadn't perfected the technique yet, so the toxins in the air still slowed him down. But even then, he was in far better shape than us. So, on top of being overpowered, he was also completely unaffected. In fact, he was treating this test like it was a casual walk in the park. And earlier, he had the audacity to criticize me for not using my own strength to win the evaluation exam. Hypocrite. He was such a hypocrite. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how smug he was about it. Feeling winded already, he called over his shoulder, his voice annoyingly chipper, without a hint of strain. I bit back a sharp retort. It wasn't worth wasting what little breath I had left on him. Alexia, on the other hand, wasn't as patient as I was. If you've got the energy to gloat, Michael, maybe use it to keep an eye out ahead instead of rubbing it in the faces of us mortals. Michael grinned and opened his mouth to say something that would have surely made my blood boil even more, when Kang's sharp voice reached us from ahead. Incoming. It was a signal. Out of all of us, Kang's senses were supposed to be the sharpest. That's why he was running in the lead, to scout for any potential threats. If he spotted something, we'd adjust our course. But if the danger was unavoidable, he'd signal us, and we'd prepare for a fight. Just like he did now. Michael was the first to react. He brandished his sword and rushed toward Kong, who was alone up front. Alexia followed next. She summoned a pair of armored gauntlets and shot forward with such speed that a shallow crater appeared in the ashen soil where she'd just been. By the time Alexia reached Michael and Kong, a giant creature had emerged from the shadows of the woods. It was monstrous, a grotesque amalgamation of arachnid and humanoid horrors, its glossy black carapace gleaming under the oppressive black sun. Its bulbous abdomen was dotted with circular red spots which pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Long, segmented legs ended in sharp, obsidian-like tips that resembled chitinous spears. But the worst part, by far, was its faces. Dozens of twisted, humanoid faces covered its torso, their mouths opening and closing silently, as if caught mid-scream. It was horror given form. I had never seen anything so disturbingly hideous. At that moment, the creature lunged toward Kong. Since Michael was the closest to him, he didn't hesitate to act. He launched himself at the beast, his sword whistling through the air. The blade bit into the creature's foreleg, slicing cleanly through the joint before it could even react to Michael's unnatural speed. A spray of thick black ichor erupted from the wound, and the giant spider let out a deafening screech that sounded like a chorus of agonized voices. The abomination staggered back, and Alexia seized the opportunity. Flanking it from the right, she drove her gauntleted fist into another leg, shattering a good chunk of the chitin and the soft flesh beneath. The ground trembled as the beast toppled to one side. But it wasn't going to be that easy. The spider twisted with unnatural agility and lashed out with its remaining foreleg. Now, Alexia was a prodigy of close-quarters combat. She was a once-in-a-generation martial talent. Under normal circumstances, she could have dodged that blow with ease and countered like it was nothing. But the toxins in her system dulled her reflexes. She was just a second too slow to take a step back. The spider's leg struck her with bone-crushing force, and though she managed to block with her gauntlets, the sheer impact of the attack was like a battering ram. The force of it sent her flying backward until she slammed into a nearby tree. Before she could recover, one of the humanoid faces on the creature's torso stretched its maw unnaturally wide and spat out a sticky white substance. The sticky glob hit Alexia and hardened instantly, gluing the blind girl to the tree. 67. Things escalated soon after that. With Alexia immobilized, Kong rushed forth to protect her. But instead of taking a defensive stance, he charged at the creature head-on with untamed aggression. The white-haired boy moved with blurring speed and leapt high into the air. One of his arms bulged slightly and thick white fur sprouted along his skin. His nails lengthened and sharpened, transforming into sharp claws. Kong descended like a predator pouncing on its prey, his clawed hand slashing downward with feral precision. The creature reared back, one of its obsidian-like legs rising to intercept the attack. Kang's claw met chitin with a sharp crack, rending through the glossy armor and carving a deep gash into the leg. The spider screeched again, a chorus of its twisted faces writhing in unison, their eerie screams somehow amplifying the already unsettling sound. Not giving the creature even a single moment to recover, Kong landed lightly on the ground and immediately darted forward again. His movements were wild but somehow calculated, each slash of his claws aimed to cripple the abomination. But the creature adapted quickly. One of its remaining legs whipped out at an impossible angle, catching Kong mid-strike. He managed to block with his enhanced arm, but the sheer force of the blow sent him skidding across the ashen ground, his feet digging shallow grooves into the soil. "Kong, fall back," Michael's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. But Kong didn't listen. Instead, he bared his teeth in a snarl, his partial feral transformation pushing him further into his animalistic instincts. His muscles tensed as he prepared to attack again, even as the spider's focus shifted entirely onto him. This was a problem even in the game. Squad 9 was strong, incredibly strong, but they had no team coordination. Most of them were arrogant, snobbish, and unwilling to follow anyone's lead. Kong, for instance, wouldn't take orders from anyone except Alexia, his mistress. So, completely ignoring Michael's earlier call, the white-haired boy charged forward once more. However, the creature wasn't going to let him get close to it again. One of the grotesque humanoid faces on its torso opened its jaw and spat a glob of sticky white substance at him. But Kong was faster. He rolled to the side, evading the glob with ease, only to see another one heading straight for him. Again, he rolled to the side, dodging the attack and closing the distance between him and the creature. Springing to his feet, Kong rushed in again. The spider fired another glob at him, but this time, it burst into a wide web midair, similar to a fisherman's net. Caught off guard, Kong was trapped in the sticky web that clung to his limbs and halted his advance. The spider shot one of its spiky legs at Kong, but Michael swiftly jumped in between to shield him from the blow. He used his sword to deflect the incoming attack, though the force of the strike still sent a jolt up his arms. Now even the beast seemed wary of Michael as it tried to retreat. But Michael was thirsty for blood. He pursued the creature and swung his sword in a wide slash. And now it was the spider's turn to deflect his blow with one of its chitinous legs. They exchanged a few more strikes, and I found myself thoroughly impressed by Michael's skill. His sword moved with an almost fluid grace, striking with surgical precision. Whether for offense or defense, his blade was always exactly where it needed to be. "Sam," Lily's voice cut through the chaos, uncharacteristically firm. I turned to her and saw her eyes glowing with a bright violet hue. There was a distant look in them, as though her mind was no longer fully present in the here and now. Without waiting for my response, she pointed toward the distance. I followed her finger, but there was nothing there, nothing, except for Alexia, who was still glued to the tree several steps away from where Lily was pointing. "The beast will move there in the next 3 seconds to target Alexia," Lily warned. And before I even had time to completely process it, I was already running. Despite my reserved disdain for Lily, I knew better than to disregard the words of a Sibyl. There were many awakened who could glimpse into the future with varying degrees of accuracy. The strongest of them could predict the future that was almost always accurate. But Lily's foresight was undeniably correct every single time. She had 100% accuracy. That was why many noble houses and the hunter associations in Luxara City were so interested in her talent. It was also why Samael had started dating her in the game, despite her being of far lower status than him. Right now, though, she was only a C ranker able to glimpse 3 seconds into the future. In the grand scheme of things, she was considered weak, far weaker than other awakened of the same rank with similar powers, since many could see a full minute ahead. Of course, the further one could see, the less accurate those glimpses became. Still, one thing was certain: if Lily foretold a warning, it would most certainly come true. And it did. The spider disengaged from Michael and lurched back to target Alexia. The blind girl was still struggling to free herself from the sticky white mold that held her to the tree. Kong was still trapped in the web, unable to move properly. And Michael was too far away to intercept the beast from the opposite direction. Confident it had found its prey, the spider lashed forward with a spiky leg, aiming to impale Alexia. But before it could land the blow, I summoned my flame lash and snapped it forward. With a sharp crack, the flame lash wrapped around the limb, and I pulled it back with all my strength, yanking the leg off course. The spider screeched, its leg missing Alexia by a good margin as the heat from my fiery whip sizzled through its chitin. But the creature wasn't done. It immediately reared back, its many faces twisting in frustration. Then, with a sudden, jerking motion, it spun around and lunged at me, its remaining limbs flailing. But before it could even reach anywhere near me, Michael charged at the beast from behind. He dove under the creature and plunged his sharp blade into its belly. The spider and its countless twisted faces let out a horrible, bone-curdling scream as Michael ran along its length, dissecting its exposed underside like the insect it was. Dark blood and viscera spilled from its wound, staining the ashen soil beneath in a sickening pool. The abomination's screeches faded, dying down to nothing as it collapsed, its massive body falling lifelessly to the earth. By the time Michael emerged from under it in a roll, the beast was no more. 68. Well, that was easy. Everyone slowly turned to Samael as he said that. Lily was massaging her forehead, trying to relieve the migraine brought on by her continuous use of powers. Kong was clawing his way out of the sticky web that had ensnared him. Alexia was still glued to a tree, her deadpan expression and petite frame making up for a comical sight in her predicament. If it wasn't for Michael, who was currently busy cleaning the fetid black blood of the slain spider from his blade, this entire squad would have been wiped out. Okay, that was not entirely true. The instructors would have swooped in to save them before that ever happened. So they weren't in any real danger, to begin with. But still, that was a close call. They almost lost. And here was Samael, with the audacity to claim it was easy. Instead of saying anything, Michael stepped toward the carcass of the abomination he'd just killed and placed his hand on it. This was the usual method for absorbing the essence from a slain spirit beasts. Zaldrith had explained the process to him countless times, but for the life of him, Michael could never quite grasp the logic behind it. It was something about how, when any creature dies, all the essence it cultivated begins to dissipate into the atmosphere as it is no longer anchored by a soul. However, if a suitable vessel, like another soul, happens to be nearby, the essence instinctively redirects itself toward it. And if more than one soul is trying to absorb the essence, instead of being distributed evenly, all of it would be drawn to the strongest, most potent of the two souls. Or at least, that was the gist of it. Michael had never been one to pay much attention to such things. Anyway, when he and Samael absorbed the essence from the two Bladurates they had killed earlier, they barely got anything. Why? Because those Bladurates were infant spirits. They hadn't cultivated much essence to start with. But this spider was different. It was massive, and more importantly, it was strong. Judging by its size and strength, it had to be a minor spirit at the very least. Its essence reserve was bound to be significant. At least, that was what Michael assumed. And he was right. The moment he began absorbing, a rush of raw energy surged through him. It flowed into his soul, filling every corner of his body with strength. His muscles felt taut, his mind sharp, and his very being resonated with newfound vigor. Then, something strange happened. A soft glow enveloped his body. Shimmering particles of light floated upward, converging just above his head. The radiance intensified, condensing into a small orb of light. Before his eyes, the orb shifted, its shape bending and twisting until it formed a glowing card. As the light dimmed, the card began to descend gently, floating toward him. Michael caught it, his fingers brushing against its smooth surface as he stared at it with a stunned expression. This was his first time receiving a card from a slain spirit beast. Well, this was only his second time slaying a spirit beast. So, there was that. Oh, nice, you got a card. Alexia's voice rang out from behind him, casual as ever. Michael turned toward her, still looking a bit dazed. He nodded slowly. Ah, yeah. Meanwhile, Samael, Kong, and Lily were busy trying to scrape away the hardened glob of web that had molded itself around Alexia, practically gluing her to the tree. Michael sighed and rolled his eyes before stepping over to the blind girl. With a precise slash of his sword, he cut through the white mold, freeing her with ease. Thanks, Alexia said, brushing off her clothes like she hadn't just been cocooned in webbing a moment ago. Samael muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like, show off. Before wandering off to sit on the ground nearby, Michael smirked as Alexia turned back to him. So, go ahead, don't keep us in suspense. She gave him a light nudge. What's the card? Michael glanced down at the card in his hand, then back at her. I don't know. I don't have an appraisal card with me. Should I just use it and find out? Alexia let out an annoyed grunt. No, rookie mistake. There are God knows how many types of cards out there. You never know what kind of power, or curse, they might have. Always carry an appraisal card with you. From his spot on the ground, Samael snorted. Yeah, man, what a rookie. Imagine not carrying an appraisal card with you. PFF'd. He said that with all the smugness he could muster, conveniently ignoring the fact that he wasn't carrying one either. Michael narrowed his eyes at him but chose not to comment. Again, before the conversation could derail further, Lily walked over and handed him a card. Here. Oh, thanks, Lil, Michael said, taking the appraisal card from her. Without hesitation, he equipped it into his soul. The card dissolved into particles of light, which flowed into his body. And after a few heartbeats, it manifested over his shoulder and began floating there. Michael looked back down at the card he had received from the spider and kept staring at it for well over a minute. An appraisal card usually worked by deciphering the runes that composed an item, whether it was an object, artifact, or card. Not many understood the exact mechanics behind it, or what the process entailed. But it was common knowledge that appraising a card you'd never seen before could take some time. So, everyone waited in silence as Michael examined the new card in his hand. But after another minute passed in complete silence, he quietly slipped it into his pocket with the solemnity of someone burying a bad news. Yeah, I'm never using that card, he muttered. Alexia raised an eyebrow, tilting her head in curiosity. Why, what's it do? Michael took a deep breath, stealing himself before responding. It's a skill card. It lets me shoot webs. Lily shrugged. That's not bad. Through my mouth, Michael finished, his voice flat. The silence returned, but this time, it was the kind that barely contained laughter. 69. After resting for a bit following their fight with the spider beast, the group started moving again. The forest surrounding them was dense, making it easy to get lost in the woods. Thankfully, it was clear where the center of the dome was, the place they needed to reach. So, they knew their destination. How did they know? Because at the center stood a tall mountain, its peak visible from anywhere within the dome. As they continued moving forward, they stumbled upon more spirit beasts, though none as formidable as the spider. They encountered 2 more Bladewraiths, both of which were taken down by Alexia. Then, they were ambushed by a grotesque creature that appeared to be a mix between a giant cockroach and a mouse. Michael managed to slay 2 of those abominations, with heavy assistance from Alexia. It seemed that Alexia was pushing herself too hard, perhaps because she hadn't been much help during the earlier battles. Regardless of the reason, they had successfully completed their first objective of slaying 7 spirit beasts. Now, all that remained was to reach the center of the dome, enter the cave where the Essence Stone was located, crush the Essence Stone, and win the test. Of course, accomplishing all of this was easier said than done. Because as they ventured deeper into the forest, the air became increasingly dry, making it painful to breathe. Everyone was visibly struggling, everyone except for Michael, that is. Well, truth be told, even he was starting to have a hard time, but his condition was still significantly better than the others. It wasn't long after that when they came across another team of cadets. Michael considered handling the situation calmly, hoping to avoid a fight. However, before he could even let a word out, the other team attacked them. Surprisingly, though he probably shouldn't have been so surprised, Samael was the first to react. He used his flame lash and immediately knocked out one of the opposing cadets. Before they could process what had just happened, the golden-haired boy was already upon his second victim, bashing his knee into his opponent's face. By that point, the rest of the group had joined the skirmish as well, quickly overpowering the opposing team. But the sounds of their battle attracted even more teams to their location. And soon, the situation devolved into a chaotic free-for-all. The air was filled with the sounds of clashing weapons, the crackling of flames, and the occasional grunt of pain. They fought in that chaos for some time before deciding to tactically retreat. It wasn't a battle worth fighting. After all, their objective wasn't to eliminate all the other teams but to reach the center of the dome and win. So, they dashed through the forest, not bothering to look back. They had no time to waste. The test was set to end in 40 minutes, and Michael was certain that 30 of those minutes had already passed. Fortunately, they were close to the center. Unfortunately, their retreat hadn't gone unnoticed. A few other teams had come running after them in pursuit. But even more unfortunately, Michael spotted something imposing and hideous emerging from the woods to his distant right. It was a giant spider. Its body was dark and glistening, with twisted humanoid faces covering its torso. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and a shrill, unnatural screech split the air. Almost immediately, the spider beast began chasing them, closing in from their right. "Oh, not again," Alexia cried out in exasperation. "Keep running, Samael shouted, coughing violently as he breathed in the acrid air. "We are in no condition to fight it." The problem was that the spider was coming from their right. It would intercept them if they continued running straight. However, they couldn't retreat either, as another team was chasing them from behind. It was a tough situation. Michael thought about proposing the only solution he could think of. "I will hold back the spider beast," he said with the bravado of a hero sacrificing himself at the end of a movie. "You all go ahead." But before he could finish his sentence, Samael stopped in his tracks, summoned his origin card, and knelt on the ground. Suddenly, a barrage of sharp spikes erupted from the ground between them and the spider, forcing the creature to change its course. However, when the spider tried to circumvent the wall of jagged protrusions, it ended up getting closer to the other teams that were chasing them. And as if sensing an easier target, the creature pivoted, turning its attention on those teams instead. The abomination had found its new prey. Before the pursuing group of cadets could even realize the gravity of the situation they were in, the spider beast crashed into their ranks, its massive legs slicing through the air with unnatural speed. Screams of terror echoed as the spider's monstrous form loomed over them, its many faces snarling in a sickening harmony. "Run, run, run, you idiot!" Samael shouted, smacking Michael on the back of the head as he ran past him. Michael stood dumbstruck for a moment before he finally snapped out of it and started running as well. Honestly, he didn't know what to make of Samael anymore. The guy was still selfish, snobby, and unbelievably annoying. Just looking at him made Michael's blood boil. But there was something different about him now. Something just wasn't the same. Michael couldn't quite place a finger on it, but it had been nagging at him for a while. It all started when he met Samael during the evaluation exam. At first, he was just as annoying as ever. But the more Michael observed him, the clearer it became, Samael had changed. Drastically. Michael remembered back in high school when Samael's eyes were always filled with cold malice. He took pleasure in causing pain, feeding off the suffering of those around him like it was some kind of sick game. He was cruel, and he reveled in it. Okay, maybe Michael was exaggerating a bit. But he couldn't help it. He had a bias against that bastard. And, if he was being honest with himself, it wasn't entirely unreasonable. Samael never really targeted Michael directly in school, at least, not until that whole fiasco with Lily. But he never stopped his friends from bullying Michael, either. In fact, Samael would stand there, with that insufferable, arrogant smile plastered on his face, while his so-called friends made Michael's life hell. He and his gang would torment anyone they wished. And Samael didn't just watch. He encouraged it, like everyone's pain was nothing more than entertainment for him. It was as if everyone was his subjects, and their misery brought him amusement. The worst part, he never seemed to care. He never cared about the people his friends tormented, not about how his actions affected others, not about anything. And Michael hated him for it. He hated him for his indifferent cruelty, for his arrogance, and for that smug sense of superiority of his. Just because he was born into the great Theospain family, just because he had a powerful origin card, he thought he could get away with anything. Michael's hatred wasn't just some small annoyance. It ran deep, almost irrationally so. But in his mind, it was justified. He hated him, more than anyone, but the Samael he hated, wasn't here anymore. This person running in front of him wasn't the Samael he knew. The Samael he knew was a sadistic, spiteful brat. He never would have let go of his feud with Michael. He never would have tried to strike a deal with him. He would have done anything to destroy him. Honestly, that's what Michael thought Samael's agenda was when he joined this squad. But instead, Samael had been nothing but helpful. And now that Michael thought about it, it had all been strategic. Even during the first fight with the spider, Samael positioned himself near Lily, knowing her foresight could be useful in any unexpected situation. And that's exactly what happened. He ended up saving Alexia. After that, Samael kept stepping up to assist in the other fights as well. He was the first to react against that other squad. And just now, he diverted the spirit beast toward the group of cadets behind them, cleverly killing two birds with one stone. It was clear, the Samael before him was different. He was more focused, more driven, but not in the same way he used to be. There was something in his eyes. The fire in them wasn't the same. Before, Samael treated the world as his personal stage, where everything and everyone merely existed to please him. But now, Michael could see something else. There was purpose behind his actions, purpose in his self-centered behavior. But Michael didn't know what that purpose was. Get a move on, Samael barked, snapping Michael out of his thoughts. If we lose this test because of you dragging us down, I'll kill you. Michael clenched his jaw. He hadn't even realized he'd been slowing down. He shook his head and pushed himself forward, catching up to Samael, then overtaking him to get in the lead. Right, nothing had changed. He still despised that guy. At least until he figured out what was going on in that head of his. 70. The oppressive dryness of the air clawed at their throats as they pushed forward. Each step that they took was heavy with exhaustion. Their bodies were slowing down due to toxins in their system. Still, they ran, as fast as they could in their condition, at least. The distant screeches of the monstrous spider and the frantic cries of the unfortunate cadets it had been diverted to still echoed faintly in the forest. The looming mountain at the center of the dome grew closer, its jagged peak slicing through the artificial sky like a serrated blade. Squad 10 exited the dense forest of black trees and entered a thin clearing around the tall mountain. But winning this test wasn't going to be so easy. Michael turned to look back and, sure enough, faint movement stirred in the distance behind them. The teams that had been pursuing them averted their course to avoid confronting the spider beast and seemed to regroup. Now they were heading straight for the mountain as well. But the worst part was that Michael could see a few more squads emerging from the woods on his left and right. Another chaotic battle would soon ensue. It was inevitable, but Michael wasn't too worried. Because much like his own teammates, the other cadets were also suffering from the oversaturation of ethylorine in the air. They were just as exhausted, their chest aching and muscles burning with every moment. None of them were in their peak physical condition. However, Michael's situation was better than theirs. He still hadn't used his origin card, so his reserves of essence hadn't dwindled at all. He could move faster and fight better. He was confident that he could take them all. At least for a few minutes. After all, as unreasonably strong as he was still just one man. If too many of them surrounded him, he'd have a hard time defeating them. Thankfully, he didn't have to fight them all alone. Aside from having the support of his own squad, every other team was going to fend for themselves, so they'd be fighting each other just as much as they'd be fighting him. Michael was sure, with him as the main attacking force, his squad would definitely be victorious in the upcoming battle. The only problem was time. There was not too much of it left on the clock. At best, there were 8 more minutes before the test ended. It was going to be a bit of a challenge. Just then, Kang's loud voice snapped Michael from his thoughts. Incoming, 9 o'clock. Everyone turned their attention slightly to their left and saw a team of 5 cadets advancing from that direction. They were the closest to Michael's squad and had decided to be the first one to attack them. Their leader, a tall boy wielding a halberd, barked orders as his team fanned out to encircle Squad 10. Michael brandished his sword and charged forward, breaking through their line before they could finish their formation. They didn't even know what hit them until it was already too late. Chaos erupted. The fight raged on and more squads poured into the clearing. The air filled with the sound of clashing weapons, shouted commands, and the occasional explosion of abilities. Michael was out there fighting against 3 squads on his own, hurling cadets around in the air like they were weightless dolls. Lily was locked in a duel with a guy carrying a giant mace. She had summoned a longbow staff and was moving with the grace of someone who knew exactly what was going to happen next. In the end, her opponent began swinging his mace around wildly, his frustration evident as he failed to land a single hit on her nimble form. Alexia darted between combatants like a phantom, her armored gauntlets glinting as she targeted exposed weak points of her enemies. She wasn't fighting to kill, this was a test, after all, but her attacks were debilitating enough to take her opponents out of the fight in a few blows. Kong was the only one in Squad 10 who looked like he was losing ground, though it was hard to blame him, he was holding off 3 opponents at once. But he wasn't going to lose. Because every single time one of his teammates was in any real danger, Michael would appear out of nowhere, shielding them from the blows, deflecting the incoming attacks, pushing them away, or doing whatever it took to keep them safe. It was impossible to hurt them with Michael around. Then there was Samael. Where was he? It was hard to keep track of him in the chaos. He'd trade a few blows with anyone who got too close, only to vanish moments later, slipping away unnoticed. Somehow, he always reappeared somewhere unexpected, using the battlefield's pandemonium to stay just out of reach. He was like a shrewd snake. But he was bound to be caught eventually. And eventually, he was. 2 cadets from Squad 14 had him cornered. When his back was drawn to one of them, he was attacked from behind and was locked in a vice-like chokehold. The other cadet saw his opening and rushed in with his sword raised high for a downward strike. But Samael wasn't going to be so easily defeated. In a single fluid motion, he threw his weight backward, crashing the cadet behind him to the ground with a harsh slam. Before the cadet could react, Samael rolled over him and escaped the chokehold, before staggering back just far enough to avoid the downward slash. The sword dug into the dirt where he'd been standing a moment before. Then, nothing happened. The 2 cadets had expected some sort of retaliation from Samael. But he did no such thing. He didn't attack back. In fact, by the time the 2 cadets regained their balance and straightened themselves up, Samael was nowhere to be seen. He had disappeared somewhere in the chaos of the battlefield, just like that. One of them couldn't help but scratch the back of his neck. I feel insulted. Run, 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 I told myself as I darted through the battlefield. An arrow whizzed past, narrowly missing my thigh, and I pushed off a cadet who charged at me while screaming like a lunatic. Then I ducked under a spear thrust, feeling the wind rush above me, and slammed my knee into the face of someone who was stupid enough to stand in my way. And all the while, I never stopped running. I knew I should stay with my teammates, fight alongside them, and help however I could. But I wasn't going to waste my precious essence, or what little energy I had left, on a pointless battle like this. So, I danced around the incoming attacks, strategically retreated from the fights, and kept slowly moving forward toward the mountain. I hoped my teammates were doing the same. So, when I glanced back to check on them, I was immediately disappointed. Those knuckleheads. What the hell were they doing? Why were they still fighting? They should be cowardly running with tails between their legs. Idiots. I'm surrounded by idiots. I spat a curse under my breath and turned back around without slowing down my pace. Thud. Then I bumped into someone. For a split second, I thought it was just another cadet who was too stupid to get in my way. But then a voice, one that sounded familiar but I hadn't heard in years, called down to me. Hello, Samael. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat as I craned my neck to look up. Standing before me was a young man, just a few inches taller than me. His fiery red hair, short and unruly, practically glowing under the sunlight as if his head was set ablaze. His skin was pale, and his eyes were as red as his hair, giving him an almost ethereal presence, like a vivid splash of color in this dull monochrome world. And floating just above his shoulder was his origin card, engraved with a glowing crimson sigil. That guy was Willem Vick Draken, one of the children of the Central Monarch, Serafina the Flame Queen. A true royal, a real-life prince, and someone I'd hoped I'd never run into. Because if he was here, that could only mean one thing, she was here too. I shuddered involuntarily. No, focus, I tried telling myself as I shook my head and forced the thoughts aside. Then I very casually patted Willem on the chest. Hey, good to see you, my man. I said with the most insincere smile I could muster as I tried to sidestep him. Talk to you later. But, to my surprise, Willem didn't move to stop me. He just kept smiling, that damned unbothered grin plastered on his face. And I immediately knew why. Because as soon as I tried to walk past him, I saw her. An elegant young woman standing behind him. She was a bit shorter than me, but her resemblance to Willem was unmistakable, the same red eyes and the same, albeit longer, crimson hair that seemed to glow like a flame. She was beautiful beyond words. But instead of admiration, all I felt was exasperation when I saw her. Her lips twisted into a knowing smirk, her eyes gleaming with mischief as she spoke. Come on, Sammy, you weren't thinking of leaving without greeting me first, were you?